Good day, I'm James Ezimoa and you're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. Close to $40 billion and rising, the Pentagon releases new figures on the cost of the U.S. military campaign against Iran. Ukraine launches another wave of strikes on the warehouses of Russia's top online retailer. And Middle East tensions overshadow ASEAN talks, with leaders warning of wider global risks. As U.S. strikes on Iran enter an 11th day, the Pentagon is coming under growing scrutiny over both the strategy and cost of the campaign. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has been facing questions from lawmakers in Congress as he seeks new funding.
U.S. President Donald Trump says Washington could soon launch a major strike on Iran's underground Pickaxe Mountain nuclear facility, while Tehran has warned that any such attack would mark a dangerous escalation and make U.S. and allied interests across the region legitimate targets. The U.S. military says it has completed its 11th straight day of strikes on Iran, targeting what it describes as military infrastructure across the country. Video released by U.S. Central Command showed what it said were airstrikes and surveillance footage from the operation. According to CENTCOM, the targets included military command centers, aircraft hangars, drone storage sites, maritime capabilities, and logistics facilities. CENTCOM also accused Iran of attacking more than 30 commercial vessels in the strategic waterway, saying those attacks have endangered civilian crews and disrupted freedom of navigation. In Washington, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told lawmakers that the military campaign has now cost an estimated $37.5 billion. Appearing before the Senate Appropriations Committee, Hegseth defended the operation while several senators questioned the rising cost of the campaign and the direction of U.S. leadership in the conflict.
I think your characterization of this incredible effort as a failure is reckless. And I think it's irresponsible. And I think it smears the sacrifice of the troops that are out there making on behalf of the American people to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Shame on you and others who call this a quagmire and a failure, and then you want to turn around and say you support the warfighter. Either you do or you don't.
Meanwhile, residents in Tehran reported hearing explosions overnight as Iran activated air defense systems over the capital, according to the semi-official Fars news agency. The conflict is also threatening regional shipping. Yemen's Houthi movement has warned that vessels trading with Saudi ports could be targeted, marking a potential escalation of its maritime campaign. Following the warning, 2 oil tankers carrying Saudi crude to Asia reversed course in the Red Sea, fueling concerns that the US-Iran conflict could spread into another front.
Joining us now to discuss the Middle East crisis is Matthew Bryza, former U.S. diplomat, joining us from Istanbul, Turkey. Good to have you, sir.
Nice to be with you, James. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, the Houthis have announced a naval blockade of Saudi Arabia. Is this a military threat or a direct challenge, to freedom of navigation?
It is definitely a threat to freedom of navigation. It's less a military threat, so it's more an economic and legal threat to the system as we know it, which, together with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, is starting to raise questions about the future survival of this centuries-old principle of freedom of navigation and free transit through geographic straits. I say it's not so much a military threat at this point because this time around, the Houthis have not fired a single weapon at any shipping, and 3 ships have turned around only based on threats made by the Houthis, which of course are themselves based upon the previous Houthi attacks in the Bab el-Mandab and in the Red Sea earlier during the conflict. Well, frankly, right after the October 7th attacks in Israel, and then that led to conflict with the United States and Israeli forces targeting the Houthis. But this time, there's been no use of military force at all, so far at least, by the Houthis.
So you mentioned that this could be or is an economic threat. If commercial shipping starts avoiding both the Red Sea and the Gulf, who would feel the economic pain first?
Well, first and foremost, of course, shipping companies, and then consumers of any goods that are transited by these ships. So that means inflation for everybody globally. But if we narrow down to oil, And we keep in mind that the largest region in terms of consumption of Gulf oil, Persian Gulf oil, is Asia, especially China and India, and that the Saudi Arabians have diverted the vast majority of their oil exports away from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea, so 5 million barrels per day approximately of the previous 7 barrels per day of Saudi exports now are exported from Yanbu, the port on the Red Sea, thanks to expansion of Saudi Arabia's east-west pipeline. Then we can extrapolate that it is Asian markets that will most immediately feel the potential of shortages of oil, especially as global inventories of oil have been drawn down and storage tanks are reaching tank bottom. So we could see a short-term shortage of oil in Asia, but all of these factors impact on global oil prices. So again, the entire world will feel the impact in terms of higher oil prices, which means higher inflation for everybody around the globe.
Mm-hmm. Now, Saudi Arabia spent years trying to reduce tension with the Houthis. Has that strategy now reached its limit?
It appears to, at least in the short term. So I absolutely agree with you, James. Yeah, so we have to look back in history briefly. So in 2015, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates intervened in Yemen as the Houthis took over the capital Sana'a. They're a rebel group from the mountains, Shiite group, Islamist group who believe in the primacy of divine law over secular law. The Saudi Arabians and the Emiratis, who are strongly against political Islam, which is what I just described, intervened, and they did not succeed. And the Houthis remain in control of northwestern Yemen, including the capital Sana'a. But in the intervening period, eventually the Saudis and Emiratis decided to stop their military campaign. There was a peace treaty, or at least a ceasefire agreement, reached in 2022, and that now seems to be breaking down. And it seems that it can't just be a coincidence that the breakdown is happening in the midst of this U.S. and Israeli war on Iran. And so I think that the consequences of the war against Iran have spilled over into Yemen and now risk reigniting this conflict between Saudi Arabia and the Houthis, which then pulls in the internationally recognized government in Yemen called the Presidential Leadership Council, the PLC, which itself faces opposition from a large organization of southern Yemenis called the Southern Transition Council. So it's a very complex political situation in Yemen growing out of the Yemeni civil war, but that conflict risks now, yes, being reignited as a consequence of the Iran war.
Mm-hmm. Now let's bring in the United States into the conversation, because obviously we can't talk about the Middle East without bringing in President Donald Trump. He has said that the United States is ready to respond. What kind of response would actually change the Houthis' calculations?
I don't think there is one, to be honest. You know, the United States bombed the Houthis for 40 plus days, right, at the beginning of the Trump administration. That inflicted serious damage on the Houthis and their military capabilities, but the Houthis are still there, fully in charge, having a tangible impact on restricting freedom of navigation and risking a reignition of their conflict with Saudi Arabia, seemingly undeterred by what the United States has already done and could conceivably do again to them, the Houthis. This time around, I think the Houthis are calculating that the U.S. will be less capable, or at least less willing, to conduct a sort of multi-week campaign against them, because the U.S. has worked through or used up so much of its arsenal of precision weapons, as well as air defense weapons, in the beginning of its war against Iran. So I think the Houthis are feeling like now is a good opportunity for them to take their chances and try to reassert control, of course, with the support of and probably the encouragement of Iran to threaten to close the Strait of Bab al-Mandab as a way to now create maximum pressure on the global economy, which is a turning of tables. President Trump used to talk about maximum economic pressure on Iran through sanctions. Now I think Iran, now together with the Houthis, are looking at maximum pressure on the United States and the global economy by shutting down both the Bab al-Mandab and the Strait of Hormuz.
President Trump also met Lebanon's president. Was that simply diplomacy or part of a broader effort to stop the conflict from spreading?
Well, it's both. Of course, it's diplomacy. And yes, it's an important part of trying to restart negotiations with Iran on the Memorandum of Understanding of last June, which you'll recall had 14 points. And point number one was a cessation of all hostilities in the region. So that meant not just between the U.S. and Iran, but also between Israel and Lebanon. So the meeting between President Trump and President Aoun yesterday in Washington is an attempt to solidify the ceasefire agreement brokered by the United States and Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington, D.C., between the government of Lebanon and the government of Israel, but without participation by Hezbollah. So keeping all of that on track, when during the course of previous decades, the government of Lebanon has proven either unwilling or unable or both to rein in Hezbollah, is a very difficult political and diplomatic challenge that sits at the heart of the United States and its quest to restart negotiations with Iran to extricate the U.S. from its war on Iran before the U.S. midterm elections in November.
Now, finally and briefly, sir, are we witnessing isolated crises or the gradual merging of several Middle East conflicts into one?
Well, first, I think we should keep in mind that there's no risk here of accidental war. I spent a lot of my time in my academic days studying the risk of accidental nuclear war. And that was possible because nuclear weapons can be used with such incredibly decisive impact at a moment's notice. But in the case of this conventional conflict, nobody's going to go to war except through a rational, conscious decision to do so. So Iran has long threatened to expand the war in a tit-for-tat way beyond Iran and to the U.S.'s military facilities throughout the Gulf, throughout the Persian Gulf, in friendly and allied countries. That's exactly what Iran has been doing. And Iran is saying if the United States targets civilian infrastructure in Iran, Iran will do the same in the Gulf states. And that's been happening. So it's up to the governments of the U.S.'s friends and allies in the Persian Gulf region to decide for themselves and make a rational calculation of whether they want to get physically involved in the war against Iran. And, well, it remains to be seen what they're going to decide.
That was Matthew Bryza, former U.S. diplomat, joining us from Istanbul, Turkey. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Now, Pakistan and Iran have held high-level talks in Islamabad focused on border security, economic cooperation, and tackling regional tensions. It comes as both countries seek closer coordination while instability continues across the Middle East. Miriam Zia reports from Islamabad.
Pakistan hosted Iranian Interior Minister Iskandar Momeni in Islamabad for high-level talks on Tuesday. The discussions centered on security, trade, and regional stability. Momeni held talks with Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi before meeting Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Chief of Defense Forces Field Marshal Asim Munir. The discussions focused on border security, cross-border cooperation, and regional stability. Both sides also reaffirmed their goal of increasing bilateral trade from $3 billion to $10 billion through stronger connectivity and border infrastructure. Islamabad has been a mediator between the US and Iran and secured a ceasefire memorandum of understanding back in June. This trip places Pakistan at the center of renewed diplomatic engagement as conflict between Washington and Tehran threatens regional stability and global energy security. Momeni will also visit Pakistan's city of Lahore before departing for New Delhi to participate in the third BRICS disaster risk reduction meeting scheduled for the 24th of July. Mariam Zia, A News, Islamabad.
Meanwhile, Iran says its interior minister's visit to Pakistan is focused on bilateral ties, not a ceasefire proposal. Turaj Shivalilu brings us more from Tehran.
Interior Minister Iskandar Momeni's ongoing visit to neighboring Pakistan is mainly to pursue bilateral agreements. The ministry spokesman said the visit was scheduled before the Israeli-US war with Iran and that discussions on the war may be raised because Pakistan is one of the mediators between Iran and the United States. In an interview with A News, however, he did not confirm reports that the Interior Minister was discussing the ongoing conflict with the US.
کشور پاکستان دعوت کرده بود و البته دستور آقای رئیس جمهور
Pakistan is a mediator in the war between Iran and the US, but the Interior Minister is not carrying an official message from Tehran to Islamabad on the ceasefire. If this topic is raised in the meetings, the Iranian delegation will relay it to Foreign Ministry and Presidential Office.
Speaking at a press conference, the spokesman also stressed that Iran will continue attacking infrastructure in neighboring countries hosting US bases used to attack Iran's non-military installations. Zainivand stated that Iran's arsenal is full and Tehran is ready to launch wide-ranging responses. The Deputy Interior Minister stressed that Iran's security forces are determined to destroy terror cells along the borders. He said that Iran has signed security agreements with neighboring countries and is in high-level contacts with them to stop cross-border infiltration of terrorist elements. Turaj Shiralilu from Tehran for A News.
All right, after the break, we discuss Ukraine strikes at the warehouses of Russia's top online retailer, Wildberries. Stay with us.
More than 20,000 partisan fighters have been hidden. We found only 3,000.
My grandmother had 3 brothers. In the graveyard, the body of just one of them.
Their struggle was very unequal and against a state that had defeated such a force as Nazi Germany.
A lot of resistant fighters in the beginning of Soviet occupation actually would end up here, if not killed somewhere in the woods.
She was arrested at her home. Her 7-year-old daughter ran to her and screamed, "Mom, please take me with you." This report having the names of the individuals who were placed in the list of deportations.
I was born in Kengia, in a labor camp. My mother was a partisan liaison.
The first years were extremely difficult, of course. Poverty, hunger. The temperature sometimes dropped to minus 50 degrees.
The train stations like the one behind me once said goodbyes to thousands of people carried from across the Baltic states towards Siberia.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome back to A News. Now, Ukraine has struck the warehouses of Russia's top online retailer, Wildberries, as it continues to target logistics and military sites in the border region. It comes as President Volodymyr Zelensky appoints a new commander-in-chief of Ukraine's military in the face of widespread public protests.
Drone attacks have struck warehouses belonging to Wildberries, Russia's largest online retailer. That's according to local officials. The company confirmed its logistics centers in Krasnodar and Novinomysk were attacked on Wednesday, injuring several people. The attacks followed earlier Ukrainian drone strikes on Wildberries logistics hubs in Kotovsk and Elektrostal on Saturday, killing 8 workers and disrupting operations which handles more than 20 million orders a day. The Kremlin denies Ukrainian accusations that Wildberries handles military supplies for Russia's war effort. It also warns against any deployment of European or NATO troops to Ukraine, calling a potential move unacceptable to Russia. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry said its air defenses intercepted and destroyed 209 Ukrainian fixed-wing drones over the Moscow region, Russian-occupied Crimea, the Sea of Azov, and the Black Sea. In Russia's Belgorod region, local officials said Ukrainian attacks over the past 24 hours killed 9 people and injured 77 others. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russian forces would continue striking vessels carrying equipment, weapons, and other military supplies to Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced a major military leadership change. He said Major General Mikhailo Drapety would become Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's armed forces, replacing Oleksandr Syrsky. The appointment comes as part of a wider reshuffle of Ukraine's military leadership, following the resignation of former Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov last week and several days of protests in the country.
Now, rising geopolitical tensions are setting the agenda as ASEAN foreign ministers and key global partners meet in the Philippines. Senior officials from the United States, China, Russia, Japan, India, and Canada are holding talks on energy security, maritime trade, and regional stability.
To our meeting today.
Southeast Asian foreign ministers from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations called for restraint on Tuesday as renewed conflict in the Middle East overshadowed regional talks in the Philippines. Top diplomats warn that escalating violence could derail diplomatic efforts and threaten global stability. The talks come as fighting between the US and Iran raises fears over oil supply, inflation, and global growth. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Iran is not serious about talks, as leaders worry about the wider fallout. He's set to meet China's Wang Yi on the sidelines of the talks in Manila. Their meeting comes amid a fragile US-China trade truce and fresh tensions over election interference claims, which Beijing denies. China's Wang Yi said that cooperation and shared benefit remain key, pledging continued partnership.
The ASEAN-China Free Trade Area 3.0 upgrade protocol has been officially signed, and for 6 years running, we've been each other's largest trading partner. In 2025, our trade volume exceeded $1 trillion. In response to a strong earthquake in Myanmar and the earthquake aftermath in the Philippines, China promptly provided assistance, demonstrating the fine tradition of mutual support between China and ASEAN countries.
Meanwhile, Japan is pushing for stronger ties with ASEAN on security, tech, and disaster response. Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi warns the global order is under strain, calling for closer cooperation. India says the world is becoming more unstable. Foreign Minister Subrahmanyam Jaishankar says no country can face today's challenges alone, especially with trade routes under pressure. Canada is focusing on trade. Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand says a free trade deal with ASEAN could be finalized this year. Russia also voiced support for ASEAN's role in the region. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov calls the bloc a reliable partner.
Russia firmly believes that ASEAN is our reliable and like-minded partner. For our part, we consistently support ASEAN's central role in all regional affairs and make our contribution to strengthening the system of interstate relations built around the association, which is based on the principles of international law, openness, equality, and I emphasize, consideration of the interests of all participants.
The week-long series of ASEAN meetings in Manila runs through to Friday.
Now, as part of a US-backed security plan, the Lebanese army has entered a town in the south of the country after the withdrawal of Israeli troops. This has raised hopes that displaced residents could eventually return home one day. Here's more.
The first handover of territory under the Pilot Zone program is now underway. Lebanese army troops have been deployed in Zouta al-Gharbia after Israeli forces withdrew from the area. Displaced residents gathered on the outskirts of the town, waiting for permission to return.
We have been waiting since the morning. We are waiting for the army's decision to allow the residents to enter the town, as the army promised that once the engineering regiment finishes its work, the residents may be allowed to enter. But so far, as we've been told, the engineering regiment hasn't finished yet because there are explosive devices and unexploded ammunition. It seems that things won't be resolved either today or tomorrow.
A senior Lebanese military official says engineering units are still clearing unexploded ordnance, and much work remains before the town can be declared safe. The handover is the first test of a US-brokered plan under which the Lebanese army would confiscate weapons from the Iran-aligned Hezbollah group in parts of southern Lebanon, alongside phased Israeli troop withdrawals. Lebanon hopes the plan will help restore control over a strip of land around 10 kilometers deep that remains occupied by Israeli forces.
Now, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani is urging U.S. authorities to arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he visits the country, citing the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant. However, President Donald Trump says he expects Netanyahu's planned trip to the United States for the UN General Assembly in September to go ahead peacefully.
As I've said, I agree with the ICC that Benjamin Netanyahu should be arrested and tried for his crimes, as I do for anyone else charged by the ICC. My administration has reviewed every avenue available under applicable law to determine whether New York City could execute the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant if Benjamin Netanyahu came here. It is clear that we do not have the independent legal authority to enforce this warrant. The federal government, however, does, and I call on them to join the ICC and execute this warrant. And I want to be equally clear. Benjamin Netanyahu is not welcome in New York City, nor is any other war criminal at large.
Now, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres will travel to Syria later this week for his first visit to the country since taking office. He's due to meet President Ahmed al-Shara and other officials in Damascus. Ahead of the trip, the UN Secretary General's representative on Syria told the Security Council there are signs of hope for the country's future.
Despite the challenges underscored by security incidents, economic hardship, and unresolved local tensions, the opportunities for Syria are real if institutions are built that are inclusive, accountable, and capable of delivering for all Syrians, building confidence across Syria's diverse communities. Sustained commitment from the international community, including this Council, will remain critical.
Let's talk to Millet Demirtas, a political analyst and former diplomat. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Azima, for having me.
Now, how significant is this visit for Syria's diplomatic re-engagement with the international community?
Actually, Mr. Azima, this process, this transformation of Syria, also backed from the beginning, I think in this last maybe years. We just saw something's really changing in Syria, in the governmental level, in societal level. Of course, years of repression, years of civil war. We just saw a real bloodshed and also very inhumanitarian situation in our neighbor. I mean, in Turkey's important neighbor, Syria. We did our best, I mean, also humanitarian sense, also with a very civil society and governmental sense, but also as Turkey and other neighbors, we need this help, I mean, from the multilateral level, and first of all, I think from the first organization of humanity, which is United Nations. We are so glad that Mr. Guterres, I mean, maybe in his last months, we know that he will be changed soon with another name, but still he really doing his best, because I think in multilateral sense, I think last week he was in China, the other weeks, of course, always in New York and the other places of the world's diplomacy. He just maybe gives important signals that this multilateralism, especially in the atmosphere of this crisis, in the atmosphere of these tensions, in our very region, I mean, think about that, still important war is going on in Iran, an important war and conflicts going on in the Middle East, I mean, just in the southern section of Syria, what's happening now in Lebanon, in Palestine, of course, the unilateral action of Israel. So I think Mr. Guterres' first visit after just 17 years, I think, after a very long time, first Secretary General's visit will give some hopes, at least to the civil society sections, at least to this fragmentation in politics of Syria, because it's still an important problem for the government.
Now, what does the United Nations hope to achieve? What do they hope to achieve that previous diplomatic efforts could not?
I think Mr. Guterres had an important contact also with some important leaders of the world diplomacy. First of all, I think our president, I mean Mr. Erdogan, also Mr. Putin, I think that Mr. Trump has some different opinions about United Nations. I think also the Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, but still I think also United States diplomacy's important support to United Nations continue. We hope so. Of course, Europe and the Asian partners, of course, first of all, China and India. We can say all the actors know that this Secretary General position is also important for giving some symbolic special supports to some governments, and special, as I said in the first response, to this crisis atmosphere like he did in this Asian importance, still ongoing conflicts. We know that Mr. Guterres also gave his endeavor to give this world diplomacy, especially in this bilateral sense of conflicts age, such figures are appearing as a hope, maybe as a last hope for humanity. Because we know that this bilateral realpolitics also still destructs many things about this peaceful, about this cooperation atmosphere. Now in Syria, also some things will change, maybe according to some principles of this maybe unified political atmosphere, maybe a unified communitarian ideal. It's just so difficult. We know that this sectarian balance is still so sensitive. But maybe United Nations, thanks to support of course, of Turkey, some other actors of this in this region, also Mr. Sharaf's government, they give, first of all, economic impulse, but also this political and communitarian impulse in the first hand.
Now, does this visit suggest that attitudes towards Syria are changing, or countries simply adjusting to new realities?
The realities is not about this, let's be 1-2 years, Mr. Azimova. We can say that Syria is a place, is a region of thousands of years of some experiences. We know that civilizations, even as the historians, anthropologists said that if you think about the risings of this civilization, we can say we always count on this principle of this. Syria is a fragmented country. We know that some governments really do their best, to unify the people, communitarian ideals, but we must be also prepared that, yes, we have some different voices, we have some different sects, also some threats from the outside actors, first of all, I think Israel, but also Iranians' responses to United States, especially these days, the ongoing war is still going on. So, yes, Syria must be prepared for some sensitive atmosphere, but that doesn't mean that it cannot turn to, again, some authoritarian, maybe past, like this under Baath's regime for many years, very inhumanitarian regime, we must always remember it. But I think, first of all, such an organization, which is, I think, United Nations, and the symbolic names like Mr. Guterres really give their support, especially when we think about this multilateralism and multilateral peaceful atmosphere.
Following up on that question, several regional countries have restored contacts with Syria. What has driven that shift?
If you think about this, maybe projects, the region also needs some projects, Mr. Azimova. Yes, the atmosphere is so sensitive, we know that, but also the countries need something new about like energy infrastructures, like economic maybe new impulses because of this ongoing crisis atmosphere. All the crises are still going on. Think about Russia, Ukraine, think about the Strait of Hormuz. Also, the Asian or the other territories are not so still in a peaceful atmosphere. We know that all the communities have some grievances because of their historical baggages, we know that. But Syria also, especially in this time, appears that it can be an important country which can give also new support to many countries, also Turkey, we know, accepted. And now Iran. Of course, Iran. Even our brother country, Azerbaijan, has new important projects. We know that from the energy infrastructure to community levels to civil society. I think Mr. Guterres and also the United Nations bureaucrats, diplomats, knowing that such countries must be supported. Also for their societal balances. Think about these Christian-Muslim brotherships. Think about the past problems between the sectarian groups and groupings. And now I think because of this, Syria is changing, and now some attitudes of some actors changing, but that doesn't mean that they can be turned to a negative side. I think they can be turned also to positive sector as the European actors, and also I think Mr. Trump's nowadays also replies that these governments, Mr. Sharaf's government, can do more. Yes, they have, of course, some historical problems still, we know that, but they can do more for this peaceful and stable atmosphere.
Mr. Demirtas, finally, where could Syria's improving regional ties make the biggest practical difference? Is it in security, trade, or reconstruction?
I think all of them have some meaning. And because of this, I think we must start, of course, first of all, with security balances, because this region is full of some conflicts, Mr. Azimov. We know that in every year we've seen another conflictual environment. We must not forget that for 14, 15 years, a very devastating civil wars continued in Syria also. These last 2 years maybe is much more peaceful, of course, much more stable, although some events, some crises still going on, but still we know that this region needs some stable and diplomatic atmosphere. I think starting from this Syria, and we hope that Iranian government, Iran can solve in a near future with some new projects, if of course some United States and Israeli actions and I think devastating attacks will stop in a very near future, we hope so. And after that, these actors can also give some independent foreign policy a chance. And at that point, the United Nations and some multilateral actors will have more important meaning in these coming days.
That was Melih Demirtas, political analyst and former diplomat, joining us from Izmir, Turkey. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Osman.
Now, the humanitarian crisis in Sudan is deepening, with the United Nations warning that hundreds of thousands of displaced people in North Kordofan are now facing emergency levels of hunger. Our correspondent Naba Mohideen reports.
The humanitarian situation in Sudan continues to deteriorate, with the United Nations warning that nearly 400,000 displaced people in North Kordofan are facing emergency levels of hunger. The UN says ongoing fighting in districts like Sheikhan, Bara and West Bara is making it increasingly difficult for families to access food and basic services. Aid agencies say they are struggling to meet growing needs as funding falls far short of requirements. The UN humanitarian appeal for Sudan remains less than half funded, limiting the amount of assistance that can reach those most in need. The World Food Programme has also warned that severe funding shortages are forcing it to limit the amount of food despite the growing crisis and the ongoing humanitarian crises in the country. The UN is urging the international community to increase funding and also secure safe humanitarian passages, warning that without urgent action, the humanitarian situation in Sudan will continue to deteriorate across the country, and of course it will impact millions of people in war zones and also in relatively calm areas. Naba Mohideen for News, Khartoum, Sudan.
Now, search and rescue operations are continuing in Afghanistan's Nuristan province after flash floods killed scores of people on Monday. Emergency teams are providing food, shelter and medical assistance to families in the worst affected areas. Tamim Pahis has more.
Nuristan province lies in the northeast of Afghanistan, a mountainous area near the border with Pakistan. This makes it challenging for rescue teams searching through the mud and rubble after intense rainfall washed through residential and commercial areas, destroying hotels, homes and farmland. The flash floods struck Parun and surrounding areas on Monday afternoon, killing scores of people and injuring 80, say officials. Around 100 remain missing, according to authorities, which warn the death toll could rise. International aid is arriving, with India providing food and tents, while Red Cross and Red Crescent partners have pledged medicines, medical equipment and other essential supplies. Here in Kabul, the Deputy Head for Disaster Affairs Coordination has held an emergency meeting with representatives of the Foreign Ministry, the Aga Khan Foundation, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the agency's World Food Programme, as well as the International Organization for Migration and UNICEF. He urged aid agencies to deliver assistance within 72 hours and improve coordination. Participating organizations pledged food, healthcare, essential items and temporary shelter. Further rainfall and possible flash floodings remain a concern, meaning rescue teams are working against both time and weather. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, News.
Now, French lawmakers have approved a landmark social media ban for children under 15, delivering on a key pledge by President Emmanuel Macron. The law takes effect on September 1st. Ross Cullen has more.
Well, with this new legislation, France becomes the first European country to bring in age controls for social media. It's something that had broad cross-party support in the Senate and the National Assembly. It's an issue that's been worrying parents and politicians. Children under 15 doom scrolling, often late at night, the impact on children's learning capabilities, the knock-on effects of reduced attention spans at school, cyberbullying, access to inappropriate adult content, fake news, manipulated videos, and AI content as well. President Macron has made social policy one of his flagship pledges for this, his final year in office. Last week, French lawmakers approved legalizing assisted dying, and this week they have approved bringing in a social media ban. It will start from the beginning of the next academic year, so from the 1st of September, the under 15s won't be able to open an account on a platform like TikTok, Snapchat or Instagram. And from January next year, all existing accounts will also be impacted by the ban. There are some concerns, however, that were raised by lawmakers and civil society organizations to ensure that there is no impact on personal privacy when carrying out age verification, and also concerns about how to enforce this ban and make sure that children aren't simply using systems such as virtual private networks to circumvent the legislation. Ross Cullen, A News, Paris.
Now, wildfires are continuing to threaten communities across southern Europe, in France, Spain and Italy. This comes as firefighters race to contain fast-moving blazes fueled by extreme heat and dry conditions.
Wildfires continue to spread across parts of southern Europe, forcing evacuations and stretching emergency services in France, Spain and Italy. In southern France, the largest wildfire in Provence this summer has burned around 1,700 hectares in the Var department. The blaze, which broke out near Ponteves on Tuesday, spread towards the towns of Cotignac, Correns and Montfort. Around 800 firefighters, supported by aircraft and helicopters, have been battling the flames, while hundreds of residents were evacuated to safety and several roads closed. In central Spain, firefighters and local residents worked together to stop the La Mierla wildfire from reaching nearby communities. The fire has already burned more than 30,000 hectares and forced the evacuation of 34 municipalities. Residents used tractors and water tanks to create fire breaks before emergency crews arrived. Meanwhile, in Sicily, wildfires have destroyed olive groves near Gadrano, wiping out this year's harvest and damaging trees needed for future crops. More than 100 emergency operations were carried out across the island on Tuesday as temperatures climbed above 40 degrees Celsius, making it harder for crews to bring the fires under control.
Now, Moldova's parliament has approved a new government led by Prime Minister Vasil Tofan. He pledges to revive the economy and accelerate the country's path towards European Union membership. Tofan says his government aims to sign an accession agreement by 2028 and prepare Moldova to join the bloc by 2030. His appointment was approved by 53 lawmakers from President Sandu's Party of Action and Solidarity, while opposition parties abstained. The vote follows the surprise resignation of former Prime Minister Alexandru Montinu after just 8 months in office. Now, 3 people with confirmed hantavirus infection have died in Venezuela, according to the health ministry. 2 other deaths involving healthcare workers in the country are under investigation, but have not been linked to the outbreak. The deaths come after a separate hantavirus outbreak linked to a cruise ship in the United States, which health authorities declared earlier this month. The ministry said the virus is mainly spread by rodents in rural and agricultural areas. We'll be back after a short break. Stay with us.
more than 20,000 partisan fighters have been hidden. We found only 3,000.
My grandmother had 3 brothers. In the graveyard, the body of just one of them.
Their struggle was very unequal and against a state that had defeated such a force as Nazi Germany.
A lot of resistant fighters in the beginning of Soviet occupation actually would end up here, if not killed somewhere in the woods.
She was arrested at her home. Her 7-year-old daughter ran to her and screamed, "Mom, please take me with you." This record having the names of the individuals who were placed in the list of deportations.
I was born in Kengia, in a labor camp. My mother was a partisan liaison.
The first years were extremely difficult, of course. Poverty, hunger. The temperature sometimes dropped to minus 50 degrees.
The train stations, like the one behind me, once said goodbyes to thousands of people carried from across the Baltic states toward Siberia.
Welcome back to A News. Now, Kazakhstan's oil exports are facing fresh uncertainty after the Caspian Pipeline Consortium reportedly stopped accepting crude. Reuters, citing 3 industry sources, says the move follows a series of drone attacks near the consortium's marine terminal. Farza Kalmoziner reports from Almaty.
The Caspian Pipeline Consortium, which handles around 80% of Kazakhstan's oil exports, has stopped accepting crude after a series of drone attacks near its marine terminal in Novorossiysk, according to Reuters. The news agency, citing 3 industry sources, says the decision follows repeated attacks on oil tankers operating near the terminal. 5 vessels have reportedly been targeted in the area since the beginning of July, raising concerns over the security of maritime operations. And according to Bloomberg, the disruption is not the result of damage to the pipeline itself. Instead, tankers are staying away from the terminal because of the security risks, leaving exports temporarily at a standstill. The situation is being closely watched by Chevron, which owns a 15% stake in the consortium. Kazakhstan's foreign and energy ministries have condemned the attacks, calling them strikes against international energy infrastructure. Ukraine's ambassador to Kazakhstan, Viktor Maiko, said that drone attacks on tankers carrying Kazakh oil do not serve Ukraine's interests. And as uncertainty over the country's main export route continues, Kazakhstan is accelerating plans to expand domestic refining. The government is increasing the capacity of its 3 existing refineries and is also starting the construction of a new refinery capable of processing up to 10 million tons of crude a year. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Thousands of young protesters returned to the streets of New Delhi on Tuesday, a day after violent clashes with police. They are keeping up the pressure on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government over allegations of widespread exam paper leaks. The youth-led Cockroach Janta Party movement says it will continue its campaign despite a police crackdown, while opposition leader Rahul Gandhi has joined the protesters. With millions of young Indians back in the movement, the demonstrations have become one of the biggest political challenges of Modi's third term. However, the education minister has promised reforms and debates. Now, Azerbaijan's Sabah football club will take a slender advantage into next week's return leg in Finland. It's after beating Kups 1-0 in the first leg of their UEFA Champions League second qualifying round tie. Katie Wilson has more.
Well, the final whistle has blown a 1-0 victory to Sabah. You can probably hear Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive going on behind me. That's the victory song that we tend to hear when it's been a pink and black victory. Now, this was a game dominated by Sabah. Sabah fans are clearly very happy with the result. 65% possession in Sabah's favour, but only one goal on the scoreboard. Now, these fans seem to be pretty happy, but bearing in mind Sabah has to travel to Finland next week, as this is a two-leg tie. Will 1-0 be enough? And how happy will Sabah be with this? Will they have wanted more, since they did dominate this game and the next leg is going to be away? So it makes for a very interesting second leg here, and we'll have to see whether that 1-0 victory at home was enough, or whether we'll see a bit of a change in tactics when they play away to Finland. But it has to be said, a 1-0 victory is clearly enough for these fans, who are very happy to see their home team winning in this Champions League qualification match.
Disappointed, honestly, saying, okay, we won the game, this is what counts, but I think we should have won 4-0, or at least with a bigger margin. But yeah, our ultimate goal was to win. A bit disappointed because of the result, but I think we also played a very good game, but didn't manage to score more goals. So yeah.
First half they could have scored 2 or 3 goals easily. So yeah, 1-0 going back home halfway. It's a positive result for us.
All right, that's the news for this hour. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.